perfectly good sermon for you, and I'm sorry that we have to change it. I really can't start anywhere else except the 18th arrondissement, which I think is French for neighborhood. I don't really speak French, but in 2007, you were kind enough to give our family a sabbatical leave. And my daughter Rachel was 10 years old. Katie was 3, I think. And we spent a week in Paris. It's the first and only time I've ever been. We rented a little apartment in the 18th arrondissement. It's the embassy area of Paris. And one night, I just could not get to sleep. And I tried and tried, and I finally just sat in the living room of this little apartment. And about midnight, Rachel, our older daughter, 10 years old, came walking out, and she could not sleep either. And so I said, honey, let's go see Paris the way it's supposed to be seen, at night, on a weekend night. So she and I quietly put clothes on, slipped past my wife, and out into Paris. We walked past all the embassy houses, and we walked to an area called Trocadero. It's the area right around the Eiffel Tower, and it's a big, wide, open area. And to our surprise, there were literally thousands of people. If you've ever done this walk, you will know that everybody comes out on a weekend night in Paris. There was a football match, a soccer match, being projected onto the wall of one of the buildings, and a couple of thousand people screaming that no wonder we couldn't sleep, screaming their heads off at this football match, all clumped together. There was a carousel, all lit up and beautiful. And so it's hard for me to pass a carousel, some of my friends know that. My daughter and I rode the carousel together in Paris that night. We walked along this big, wide, beautiful walkway. We walked literally right underneath the Eiffel Tower. And there were people selling every manner of thing you can imagine. People were begging, people were singing, people were reciting poetry. Every kind of nationality that you could see were out to enjoy the City of Lights at night. This is one of the most special nights I've ever had with my daughter. And I tell you that because it's impossible to think about what's just happened and not realize that it's a night like that those terrorists were trying to take away. This is not about religion. Because anything about death is never about God. I realized that in 1992, to take you back a few years further, when I was married, I was just worried about how to stay married in 1992 more than about 10 minutes. I just graduated from seminary. I got married the day after we graduated. I did not know that in 1992, a very significant book was published. It was by a noted scholar. Francis Fukuyama is his name. He published a book in 1992 called The End of History and the Last Man. And Francis Fukuyama, in the full bloom of that post-Cold War beautiful feeling that gripped everybody, in 1992, Francis Fukuyama wrote in The End of History that Karl Marx was wrong. Karl Marx thought that communism would be the greatest expression of human governance. And Francis Fukuyama said, no, that's not true. We now know that liberal democracy, universal human rights, a capitalist free market system is the final and highest form of governance that we will ever experience as a human community. He said, we're about to get there. Fukuyama did. He said, when we get there, there'll be no more need for written history. History as we know it, the give and take of societies, it'll all end. Because everyone is going to get there. Doesn't that sound beautiful? He said there'll be no more need for nations, armies, all of those things can disappear. One of Fukuyama's teachers was so incensed at the publication of this book that he gave a lecture and wrote an article the following year, in 1993, in the Foreign Affairs Journal. In 1996, he turned the article into a book. The book's title, perhaps you've heard of it, The Clash of Civilizations and the Remaking of World Order. Fukuyama's teacher's name was Samuel Huntington. And Samuel Huntington gave a response to his brilliant student. Huntington said that it is not economics, it is not universal human rights or national identity that will determine the future of our society. It's civilization and culture itself. It is actually how we see the world. It is how we see ourselves that will be the fault line of future conflict. And he said it will not be anything that Fukuyama thinks. He says, as a matter of fact, once we get there, Huntington predicted, we will revert back to humanity's natural state. And that is a state of profound conflict over culture and civilization itself. Samuel Huntington said very publicly to his student Fukuyama, history will not end. It recycles itself. And I stand here today thinking, boy, how's it working for Francis Fukuyama these days? Do you see everyone's assumption of humanity sweeping across the planet in one beautiful, united moment? You could not today walk the walk that my daughter Rachel and I took that night in 2007. We listened, Deacon Steve and I were driving up from Denver on Friday night. We were coming back from doing a meeting and a hospital visitation, and we were listening as this horrible story unfolded on the radio. One of the commentators, I won't tell you the channel, it doesn't matter, the station, one of the commentators said, this was not a very sophisticated attack. They didn't attack some huge target. They went after small. It doesn't feel organized. What's the goal? And at that point I wondered, why do they pay people like that to talk to us? Because that was the dumbest thing almost I've ever heard. They attacked a restaurant, a theater, and a stadium. The very essence of what Parisians enjoy and what makes them feel human, where people gather on a Friday night to enjoy life itself. That's where they went. And the clear message is, we will take away your peace and your safety and your culture and your life. Now, I don't want to end with Fukuyama or Samuel Huntington, because there's a third book I'd like to direct you to. For extra church points, can anybody tell me the third book that might be useful on days like this to open and read? What's that again, please? I'm sorry, we're going to be on YouTube. The Bible. The Bible is an excellent book to open in moments like this, because God has something to say in moments just like this. In today's gospel, and by the way, I didn't choose it. It's the regular reading. Every 3 years we get this one reading, right? Everybody missed it today. In today's gospel, Jesus and his disciples have gone in Mark's gospel to Jerusalem only one time. These guys are from the north. They're from a rural agricultural Galilee area. They're fishermen, they're tax collectors. They've never been to the big city of Jerusalem. How many people remember the first time you ever went to a city like New York and hurt your neck? This is what the disciples are doing all the way when they're walking through Jerusalem. They get to the temple and they see one of the wonders of the ancient world. It took Herod 46 years, we're told, to construct this temple. 400-ton stones at the bottom of the wall. 40-ton stones in the middle of the wall. 4 tons at the top. It was one of the largest artificial edifices in the history of the world. And they are absolutely, thank God Steve didn't break into his Gomer Pyle voice. I'm dating myself here. But can you hear what the disciples are really saying in the text? Golly! I ain't never seen something so big like this before in my life. Well, God is here, and this is big, and God is huge. Wow, I'm awfully impressed. You know, can you just imagine? And they say, the Greek says, Master, look what big stones. Come on. They're just shocked. This is the center of Jewish life. This is where God dwells. This is where everything's going to be okay. And Jesus says, you know what? Take a look at those stones, because I promise you, there will not be one stone that you'll see left on another stone. Less than 40 years after Jesus uttered those words, this picture on the front of your bulletin, feel free to take a look. This is not an ancient picture. This is the picture that you will see today when you go to Jerusalem. Less than 40 years after Jesus said this, there was a massive Jewish revolt. And the Roman Emperor, General Titus, before he became emperor, the Roman Emperor Titus left his Army Corps of Engineers in Jerusalem, and they worked for 10 years to tear down these stones. Those 4-ton stones at the top, this is Rome's answer. They tore the stones down, and they crashed and fell, and they just left them there. This is where they've been for almost 2,000 years. And Titus says to the Jewish people, you think this is the center of your world? Let me tell you what Rome can do to this. And this was the answer. Everybody got it? What are the terrorists doing? It's not religion, by the way. Someone can yell, Allahu Akbar, it doesn't matter. It's a cult of death. What are they doing? This is exactly what they're doing. They don't have to touch the Eiffel Tower to destroy Parisian culture. And Jesus says to his disciples, when all this stuff starts to happen, when it all starts to fall apart, do not be afraid. God really does get this. Samuel Huntington wrote in his book that many of us thought we were born into a world of peace, that most people want peace all the time, and yet every once in a while it's punctuated by severe conflict. Was anybody know this world? Was anybody born into this world? We'll have a better life than our parents, and our children will have better lives than we will, right? Things will progress. They'll have more money. They'll have more technology. Everything will get better over time. Samuel Huntington says, as Jesus says, what if that's reversed if you look at history? What if there are long periods of very severe conflict punctuated by short periods of peace? This is exactly what Jesus was saying. Jesus knew the world as it is. He knew how human beings act. He knew the feelings you and I are having right now. I was disgusted and horrified to listen to that news feed. And I want to tell you, as Christians, we need to hear the voice of Jesus in moments like this. We are next week finishing the Christian year. The Christian calendar ends next week. That's why we're having a wonderful celebration of something called Kirtan of the Targum. In the Bible, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end of time. There is an end of days, and Jesus says we're going to get there. When I was young, I was terrified by that notion. I was born and raised in Florida, and in Florida they can scare the hell into you better than any other state, maybe outside of Texas. Can I tell you that if you get scared in the Christian faith, Florida is the state for you, and then we're going to put them on television. And people said, oh, when Jesus comes, it's going to be terrifying. I'm 11 years old sitting there going, oh my God. That's not the picture of Christ. Jesus said, don't be afraid. God has this. As an adult, I find myself praying for that day to come where God will set all things right. And friends, may I say, how do we respond? I'm asked this all the time. I got an email 2 days ago. How do we respond in moments like this? I have a conversation. People say to me, how can you believe in God when all this evil stuff happens? I said, what about this is about God? This is not about God. God's about life. This is about death. What's the question? Why do we have a pledge drive? Why do we have ministries? Why do we have a youth pastor? Why do we have a children's minister? Why do we have people that show up when things are at their worst? It's because God speaks to life. And friends, we are to stand in moments like this together, in unity, under Christ. We are to be who we are and to look at that darkness and to say, you do not get a voice. You do not get the final word. This is not about religion. It's not about God. It's about death, and we rebuke that. We stand against that. We have no time for that. It's disgusting. God is about life and living in peace and joy, and that is something that nothing can take away. I'd like to think that tonight, somewhere in Paris, there is a father and a daughter who choose very courageously to make the same walk that my daughter and I did. To claim the life that they have been given and to enjoy the things that are God-given. I'd like to think that we have a church that can stand in a moment like this and hear the voice of Jesus say, do not be afraid. God does have a plan. To turn to a community that's so anxious and hinky and freaked out and say, please stand with us. Jesus is real and he is alive. He knew all about this. God's got this. I'd like to end with a moment of silence we were teaching the children about. I'd like to have that moment now. We don't know the names of everyone who died, 130 and counting. But we know that God does know those names. So I'm going to ask Dana to skip over the Nicene Creed and not to have our usual moment of music. But just would you again stand with me for a moment of silence in solidarity with